And I'd like to welcome everybody to this Content Standards Rollout Follow-Up Webinar number 1. And we are happy to have Marion Thatcher with us today, as well as 3 presenters that will be introduced. And so at this time, I am going to pass the presenter rights to Marion, and also have Marion unmute herself, and you have the presenter rights now, Marion. Go ahead.
Thank you, Anne Marie, and thank you everyone once again for showing up at 4 o'clock on Friday. I think that's awesome. And I'm sure you're going to be blessed with a fabulous weekend just because you showed up here at 4 o'clock. It's nice to be with you, and I look at this and I see follow-up webinar number 1. I'm like, webinar number 1? It feels like webinar number 20 by now. We've covered a lot of ground, but we have 3 more of these, this one and then a couple of more in April and May, and they're going to be really fun ones, I think, for you. As Anne Marie said, we have some great presenters today. So here's what our hour is going to look like together. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the results of the interest survey that you did a couple of weeks ago, and then we'll have Delia Watley share with you how her coaching is going at Irving ISD, and Angie Mudd share about her coaching process and with her colleagues at Community Action. And then Jan Wisenant, who you know as a trainer and one of the trainers that's been with us in this project since the beginning, is going to share a teaching tip related to the standards. So that's our plan for today. So this is what the results of the interest survey look like. There were 58 people that had completed it the last time I got the results. And the highestly, that's a nice word, the item that was the most requested was to hear from other programs, and that is so perfect because that's exactly what we're going to do for the next 3 webinars. So you're going to hear from a couple of different programs on each webinar, and you're going to be able to get suggestions from them, give them suggestions, ask them questions, and kind of brainstorm together about the challenges and how to meet them. Other things that were requested were teaching tips. The next highest thing was teaching tips related to the standards in the 3 program areas. And so we'll be doing one of those on each of the webinars as well, and starting with that today with Jan. And then there was a place to write in if you had other requests. So these were some of the other requests that were written in by at least one person and sometimes more, talking about the syllabus, sharing lesson plans, choosing a standard to focus on, digital literacy. I know you have a lot of good resources for digital literacy in the Tech and Tell webinars that Anne Marie coordinates. And how programs are coaching, hopefully we will be addressing that as you hear from your colleagues. So thank you all who completed that survey. That was really helpful, and as you can see, we're basing what we're doing on that. So that's my introduction, and we're going to go right to Delia Watley. Let me just scroll down to my slide on my other monitor so that I can introduce Delia to you if you don't know her already. She's a program manager for the Adult Education and Literacy programs in the Irving ISD, which exists under the service area realm of the Dallas County Consortium, with Workforce Solutions Greater Dallas as the lead recipient. She began her career in education in 2002, managing the IrvingNet, or is it Irving.net CTC program, a collaborative educational effort for the community of Irving, Texas, between the Chamber of Commerce, Northlake College, the City of Irving, and the Irving ISD, which sounds like a great collaboration. Ms. Watley serves on the executive board of TALE and conducts presentations for adult educators across the state of Texas. So, Delia, I'm going to turn it over to you. And I guess I'm going to move your slides, right?
Yes, please.
Okay, I will.
Thanks, Marianne. Okay, well, it's a pleasure to be with you all this evening to talk a little bit about what Irving ISD has done as far as the content standards coaching. for our area, and then also talk about what the Dallas County Consortium has done with the content standards as a whole. Irving ISD is part of the Dallas County Consortium. We have 6 providers within the consortium. Irving ISD is one of 2 school districts. The other is Richardson ISD. We have the college, Dallas County Community College District, Richland College, Wilkinson Center, and ResCare. Workforce Solutions Greater Dallas is our board and grant recipient. Next slide, please. Irving ISD exists within a community of many immigrants. Within our city is the zip code 75038, which is the most diverse zip code in the United States. So you can imagine that we have many immigrants coming from various countries, and so ESL and EL Civics are very important to our community. We serve about 700 plus students each year. Our classes include EL Civics, ESL, including Workplace ESL, HSE, Basic Skills, Family Literacy, Digital Literacy, and then we have several IET EL Civics courses, and that would be Fuel Education, Hospitality and Tourism, Stalls, Clothing and Textiles with Entrepreneurship, Home Depot Home Improvement, and also we have the technology, Digital Literacy for the workplace. We chose the first 3, Fuel Education, Stalls, and Home Depot for our immigrant population because all 3 of those can also occupy entrepreneurship roles. Next slide. Okay, so when we returned from the coaches training and we learned how to unpack the standards, the first thing that I wanted to do was to present the standards to my staff in an easy format. So I created a little form. It's a quick form, access form for our teachers to use where I organize the standards by levels for ESL. We use the ESL content standards. And so those were organized by levels. So as you can see on your screen, level 1, we have listening, speaking, reading, and writing all together. And then if we flip over, we'll have level 2, with the 4 categories, level 3, and that way our teachers would be able to access their levels in an easy format. All of these templates will be uploaded to the community of practice, and so they'll be available to you if you'd like to use them in your program. Next slide, please. Our first assignment for our group here at Irving ISD was to assemble in a staff meeting. The agenda, as you can see attached, was pretty simple, but it was a fun activity day. I actually created little suitcases out of construction paper, and that is how the standards were delivered to staff. And so I thought it might be maybe a little corny to some, but then afterwards I found that it was not because I had those that missed the meeting calling me up saying, "Where's my suitcase?" So I thought that was a pretty neat idea, and it lended to a fun activity day for us. So each of the teachers went through a process of unpacking the standards, and we learned this in our coaches training. And so we went through that training there in the staff meeting. Afterwards, I asked the staff to choose any of the standards, and they assembled in groups, and so we had about 5 or 6 groups, and so they all had to create a lesson plan, and I gave them about 30 minutes or so to create a lesson, and then they presented to the entire group using their standards. And I did that because I wanted to show them how easy it was for them to grab a standard, think about it, work within a group as a team, and create lessons with the standards, because I know that some teachers would be thinking, okay, this is one more thing you're adding to my plate. And so I wanted to make sure that when I delivered the standards to them, it would be in a non-threatening way. Next slide, please. Okay, and for those that attended the coaches training, you remember that Marianne gave us a sheet that displayed the standards in action. So I typed them all on one-page form so that our teachers could have and realize that using the content standards was not just listing them on your lesson plan, but actually using them in the classroom with your students. And if you're using them, then it would be noticed, and this was an easy way for them to look and see, okay, for example, as you can see on your screen, instructor presents lessons clearly, so they can sort of reflect on themselves and determine whether or not the lesson was clear. Bullet B says instructor outlines a well-defined standards-based lesson objective. So then if you're not using standards objective on your lesson plan, that's a clear sign that your standards are not in action, et cetera, et cetera. Next slide, please. I use an evaluation and monitoring tool when I go around to evaluate the teachers, and I do this once a year. And so I went ahead and changed my form that I use to include the AEL content standards to make sure that when I go out and monitor that I'm looking for those standards and I'm looking for the standards in action, and that it is seen on my monitoring tool and my evaluation tool that I use with my teachers. Next slide, please. Also, I wanted to mention that because I told you I was going to talk about Irving ISD, but also our consortium as a whole. We, under Monica Stansberry, her lead, she's with the community college, she has actually created a rubric for us to use, for the coaches to use. She and Kenneth, a couple other folks within her group, and it's called an instructional observation rubric. Once it's finalized, we can make sure that it's uploaded to the community's practice for anyone who wants to use it, but it's a simple one-page form that has 5 different groupings: learning environment and classroom management, instructional planning, delivery of instruction, expectations and assessment, and content mastery. And then it has 4 ratings: excellent, good, fair, and poor, with descriptions beneath. It has a second page to it for you to list any kinds of comments or evidence that you may have. But it's a pretty nifty tool for your coaches to use when they go out to make their observations. And that's pretty much all that I wanted to offer today. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Delia.
Okay.
Thank you. That's plenty of information, and I'm well. First of all, let me ask if any of you have questions for Delia. Type them in the chat, and make sure you're sending to everyone so everyone can see them. And while you're thinking about that, I'm just going to ask you another question, which was, I was really interested to hear how she revised her teacher evaluation form. And I wonder if any of the rest of you are dealing with that issue in any way. And I see Larissa saying, as a coach, I don't feel that it's appropriate for me to be monitoring or evaluating. So yes, if you're not in that role in your job,
right,
you're correct about
right.
that.
And that's what I use as the program manager when I go out and I do evaluations monitoring. I have not used the form yet with that evaluation. It's done once a year with my teachers. But the rubric tool, the instructional observation rubric tool that I mentioned that Monica and Kenneth created, that would be a great tool to go out because it's pretty user-friendly, it's not threatening, and it just offers a lot of helpful hints for your instructors.
I look forward to seeing that because the observation form that we gave you from Standards in Action is quite long and involved,
Right.
and it's a little overwhelming for teachers to think that you're going to be looking for all those 29 things or however many things are on that list. So you have a probably more user-friendly rubric to use for observation. So that's great. So I'm not seeing any more questions or thoughts on that. So we're going to go ahead and go forward and go ahead and type if you're still thinking and typing. Larissa said thank you. Okay. Larissa and everyone else, make sure you're sending to everyone. So I'll try to watch and share what I see in the chat, but it helps if you send it to everyone. And Felita said, I like the way Delia laid out everything. Good job. Thank you. Thank you, Delia.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to Angie Mudd. And Angie has worked with Community Action, Inc. for 14 years. She began as a part-time ESL teacher in 2004. And how many of us began as part-time teachers and wound up doing all kinds of things that we never thought we would do? She is now a coordinator for one of the largest learning centers in community action located in Kyle, Texas. She oversees ESL, HSE, Spanish HSE, IET, and workplace ESL classes. She is currently teaching an ESL class, helping with curriculum development, and providing instructional coaching for the South and East counties of community action. So she has a little bit different model than a lot of us, and it'll be interesting to hear what she's doing with the coaching process. So Angie.
Great. Thank you, Marion, for having me on to speak about our program.
Absolutely.
Happy Friday, everyone. Okay, first of all, a little bit about Community Action. We are part of the Rural Capital Area service area. We serve 9 counties around Austin. You can see the counties there. That little picture is a picture of our counties. Austin is in the middle, which we do not service. That's Travis County. And we have 9 counties, the 9 counties around Austin. Most of our population that we serve is rural. We are one of 2 community-based organizations in Texas that receive funding from the workforce. Others, I believe all the others are school districts or community colleges. So because we're community-based, that means that we are mainly in other people's spaces. We have a couple of learning centers that are our own, but otherwise we're in libraries, apartment complexes, schools, those types of things. We have approximately 100 teachers. We serve over 2,000 students a year. Our teachers are spread out among the 9 counties. We have anywhere from 1 to 200 miles from the northwest part of our service area over to the southeast part of our service area. So that definitely makes us unique. Next slide. Because of our layout, what we did was train 4 coaches. So I'm here representing us, but I work very closely with Paula and Kate and Morgan to do this. It's been a joy for all of us to get to work together. And we've done 2 ESL coaches and 2 HSE coaches. We have 1 ESL and HSE for the Northwest area and 1 ESL and HSE coach for the Southeast, 1 for Northwest and 1 for Southeast areas. So that's how we've divided up. We have worked collaboratively to cover our large service area and divided our teachers among them to coach to deal with that challenge. So, okay, next slide. So how we did our coaching process, we had an initial annual in-service in August before the majority of our classes started. We introduced the standards at this in-service. We unpacked the standards. We gave syllabi. We had met before the in-service and gave a syllabi templates and lesson plan templates for the teachers to use that had taken the standards and placed them on there. Then we met quarterly, the 4 coaches. We would get together after each training and work on the syllabus, work on the lesson plan template. We did the gap analysis. We also reviewed topics from the trainings that we wanted to implement and talked about how we wanted to implement them with our teachers. We divided the teachers according to our area. So those up in the north drove to see their teachers. Some of them were still an hour apart trying to drive. So that was a little challenging, dividing up our teachers. We originally discussed having a large meeting where we did a teacher training, but after discussing it, we decided to meet individually or in small groups with our teachers. That helped us deal with some resistance we had toward the standards in the in-service. We didn't want to give space for that, and also helped our teachers to collaborate together, and also gave us time to hear from them. So at those small group meetings or individually with teachers, we discussed backward design, and most of the time we use the 5-step process from Standards in Action. We would look at lesson plans that teachers had already taught and identify how they were aligned to the standards. If they weren't aligned to the standards, then we would look at how we could tweak the lesson a little bit to help it fit in the standards more. And then we provided everyone with a copy of the standards and just took some time to look through them, get familiar, see how they're written, see what different areas they're kind of grouped into, and then hear people's concerns that they had. We also identified gaps in our teaching. So for those standards, especially the higher level ESL, writing standards that's raising the rigor of our teaching, we talked about how we can better meet those standards and teach those standards in some of our classes. Okay, next slide. So, of course, there's been challenges. One of the greatest challenges that we've had is mentoring all of our teachers because the service area is so large. Even after dividing them, we'd still have to drive an hour or so to meet with them, like I had said earlier. So having time and scheduling conflicts, a lot of our teachers work a full-time job and then are teaching for us part-time in the evening. So there wasn't a lot of time to meet. And, of course, as coordinators and instructors and program managers, we have busy schedules, and so that's been difficult, scheduling and having time and figuring out when we can meet with everyone. I took advantage of spring break and had a meeting then, and about 10 teachers could come. So that was the greatest turnout I've had at one. We had another challenge, number 3, we had some resistance towards using a syllabus and content standards, especially initially, you know how change is. But to help deal with that, we'll talk about the solutions, but it's gotten a lot better since we've met individually and given space for teachers to be heard. I think that they've become much more receptive. We have a couple of issues with mentoring some teachers that were more experienced than our coaches. We do have retired teachers that taught in the school district for 20 years, and they have a certain way of doing things. And so that was a little bit challenging for especially one of our coaches. So we've talked about that. And then knowing how much time to allot to mentoring or coaching. We didn't want to just have it be something that we met with each one and checked it off a box, but it has been difficult to know exactly how much time to spend with each group and each teacher. So I see some of you are already typing in the chat. Have you experienced any of these challenges? If so, which one? Type which number. I see that a couple people have typed 3 and 4. Resistance has been an issue in your program. Mentoring teachers with more experience, I agree that's hard. And you don't want to come in and observe and say you're going to change things if they have more experience. Time, scheduling, Janice, definitely. We know in adult education we always do lots of different things, don't we? Okay, I see 1 through 4, so very similar experience with us, large area. I think it would be very hard if you only had one coach for a very large area, so I'm thankful to have coworkers to split that up with. 2 through 5. Denise says 1 through 4. So all of them, I think we're all on the same page of experiencing these similar challenges. So the next slide, Marian, these are some of the solutions that we've done for our program. So one, which I already spoke about, we divided our area among 4 coaches. I think this has helped tremendously. One, we can all get together and collaborate and come up with great ideas, and also we can bring our issues to each other and then help come up with ideas on how to deal with what our teachers are either complaining about or resisting about. Or we've tried to be consistent on organizing our meetings and training so that we're all teaching the same thing and we know all of our teachers are getting the same thing. So that's been great. We did decide to meet with teachers in small groups. This was to help address the resistance, which I saw a lot of you typed in that you had. It also helped with the scheduling conflict. So instead of having to meet every teacher individually with 100 teachers, we could offer 3 or 4, and then they could pick 3 or 4 times, and they could pick which one was best for them. We also did this in hopes to help our teachers collaborate with each other. This is something that a lot of teachers mention, not having an opportunity to speak with the other teachers that are teaching in their area because we are part-time. So we wanted to provide that for our teachers also, and I think that has really helped. We used the strategies to help with the less experienced coaches. We used a lot of strategies from the training, the backward design, behavior checklist, key mentoring strategies, the 5-step process of looking at the student's work and at the lesson, instead of just focusing on how those teachers are teaching. We've tried to present it more about, you're already doing this, now we just want to show that we're using it, and we want to show you how you can document it because you're already a great teacher. So that was number 4, focusing on standards and lessons rather than on teachers' behavior. And then lastly, we've worked with our director to document our meetings and take note of when we've met, but it still remains a challenge on how many hours or how much time to dedicate to coaching and mentoring teachers. So I feel like this is one that continues to be a challenge for us. I feel like the small groups have really reduced the resistance that we've experienced towards them. Most of the teachers have been very grateful for the time to collaborate together with other teachers and also for the guidance. And in those meetings, we've asked what they're needing, and so as coaches, we've been able to provide them with resources and links and ideas, and I think they've been grateful for that time spent with them as well. So overall, it's been a very positive experience. I think it's gotten better and better as we've been trained and as we've gotten strategies from our training as well. So I look forward to hearing any solutions that you all may have. Marian, I think on your next slide you have some questions for them. So thank you, everyone, and good luck out there.
Thank you, Angie, and thank you for sharing your challenges and some of the solutions you came up with. And you can clearly see from the response in the chat that you're not alone in any of those challenges. So I was thinking maybe we can focus on each one of these things. Actually, maybe I should go back to this one and say, let's start with number 2, having time and scheduling conflicts, because I heard you say that one of the biggest challenges, or at least one of the challenges, is your nighttime part-time teachers that teach in the day, that have a different job in the day. So
right.
That, I think I've heard that from more than just you. So I wonder if any of the rest of you are having that challenge. If you could type in the chat and any thoughts about how you're dealing with that, any great ideas about how to find time to be with those part-time night teachers.
Saturday becomes an option, but not everyone likes meeting on Saturday.
Yeah, that has its own challenges, doesn't it? Saturdays or Thursday evenings. Thanks, Karen.
I also believe one of our coaches, Kate, they were able maybe to use part of class time at the end for meetings, maybe 30 minutes. I can't remember if that was Kate or not, but taking some of the class time when they would normally be in, just 30 minutes at the end, and using that for scheduling also helped.
I know that Liz Moya is with us today, and I've heard her say that she was struggling with this also with her night teachers, and finding like 15 minutes here and there when their students are going to the lab to do a task in the lab or something like that. She could grab a teacher and just sit down with them for a few minutes to talk about how they're doing with the standards, but it's pretty challenging. So as much as we can share about that, it would be great. And then a lot of people typed in number 3, some resistance towards using a syllabus and content standards. And Angie, you had some great suggestions on that. And I wonder if anybody else has. I heard some, well, I virtually saw some head nodding when you were talking about that issue. So I wonder if any of the others of you have other strategies you'd like to share right now about how to kind of address or roll with that resistance and get through it.
I see a lot of people using technology, the Google Classroom recording. I saw someone type that they record and have short screencasts using Zoom and Skype. That's a great idea, especially for a spread out program like we are as well.
That is a good idea. Classroom, interesting. Your Google Classroom PLC, wow. On Fridays. Thank you. Thank you all. And what about mentoring teachers that have more experience than you? That can be a challenging situation to be in. And I'm sure that other coaches have experienced some of that. Any advice to that coach that's having a hard time working with a very experienced teacher? Okay, well, we'll hold on to that one. And also, here we go. Liz, more experienced teachers, I would bring them into the fold and capitalize on their strengths. Good suggestion. Give them respect, focus on coaching in areas they want to improve. Yeah, as much as the teacher has the opportunity to help define what's going on, that really helps, I think. If you show how it really connects with what they are already doing, yes, that get more buy-in.
Great.
I try to meet them in the middle and ask them for some suggestions and their opinions. Thanks, everyone. You're a wealth of possibilities here. And just the last one, it was about how much time, and I don't know, this is individual to every program, how much time is allotted to you in your position to devote to coaching. But I'm just curious if any of you can share how much time you do have for coaching per week or per month or however it's defined. I'm just curious to know how your programs have defined it with you or for you. How many hours do you have? Okay, that must be
not good.
It comes in waves. Okay, so sometimes you're not doing anything focused on this project, and then sometimes you're doing a lot. 5 hours a week, great.
Wow.
Or 5 hours in 1 week and then none the next week. Is that what you mean? Then nothing for a while. Okay, thank you. All right. So nobody has like a set number of hours per week that they can devote to this?
And on Wednesday, when we talked with that group, they did mention spending more time for those teachers that need extra help. So depending on after that initial meeting with them, if they're asking for help, then those are the ones maybe you reach out and spend more time with. I like that suggestion.
Thanks. And Janet, carving out time from report writing time. Yeah, sometimes you have to carve it out from somewhere else, don't you? Okay, I'm going to move forward. not a set number of hours per week. 45 minutes in the morning once a week. A few minutes for individually for evening teachers. Great. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Let's see if I covered all my... I think we did answer these questions in the Q&A already, so thank you. My teachers have my email and cell phone numbers. Whenever they need help, they call or text. That's great. As long as it's not at an ungodly hour. So your time is defined by your teachers, really, isn't it? Not by your administrator. So thank you. Okay, let's move forward. We're going to sort of switch gears here to go to Jan Wisenant, who is, as you can see, she's been an ELA teacher and trainer for a long time. She was a Math Institute trainer, and she's the trainer of trainers for the TABE for Texas. So, Jan, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Marian, and good afternoon to everyone. Hope y'all are having a nice Friday. It's almost go home time, isn't it? Today I'm going to share with you an ELA lesson plan and some tips on the speaking and listening portion of the content standards. And so, as I was thinking about a lesson plan, several ideas came to mind, but one that just kept coming back and showing up again in my mind was this one on new car versus used car. And some of you may remember this activity because it was actually shown to us at the Sustained Professional Development that Texas did. I think it's been at least 10 years ago on effective instruction for all adults. And it was brought to us by Nancy Payne and Neil Stromonsky. And it was a sustained, like I had said, and it was similar to content standards in that it went on for a year, and we had, I think it was 4 face-to-faces that lasted like 2 or 3 days each time, and then we had homework. So it was similar to that, and we got to try out a lot of different strategies. And over the years, I have used this lesson plan many times in a variety of ways. And I think one of the reasons that it keeps surfacing in my class was that it has good bones. It has really good structure. It's very adaptable to a lot of different areas. And it can certainly be used in a multi-level class, which is certainly a plus as most of us teach a multi-level class. And it also can address a variety of benchmarks. And so today I'm going to adapt this lesson plan and show you how to use it with listening and speaking sub-area. The lesson starts with a short scenario that kind of just sets up the lesson. So let me just begin by reading this scenario to you. It's on your screen, I think, right now. Bob's car is falling apart. He decided he needed a better car. So he went to a car dealership to start looking at cars. He wasn't sure if he should buy a new car or a used car. There were many things to consider, and Bob had to start thinking about what would work best for him. He spoke with Paul, a car salesman, about some of the new cars. Later, he was referred to Kathy to talk about used cars. Both Paul and Kathy were very knowledgeable about the cars they were trying to sell. However, Bob also knew they were salespeople. After talking with both Paul and Kathy, Bob told them he would have to think about what would work best for him. He went home to make a list of the things he needed to think about and consider before he could decide whether to buy a new car or a used car. Next slide. So this is how the activity works. You would start by reading the scenario like I did to your group. And then after that, on a flip chart or a whiteboard or whatever you're using in your class, you would write, what does Bob need to consider? So what we're going to have the class do is to create some vocabulary and ideas on what they think Bob needs to consider when he's purchasing either a used car or a new car. And I always try to keep that vocabulary very simple because remember, this is a multi-level class. And so you just keep trying to pull and get them to tell you ideas about what they should consider. Some of the things that I've gotten from them that they might respond with is they'll always usually ask, well, we need to consider the gas mileage that each car gets. Does one get a better gas mileage than the other? How expensive would it be to refuel it? potential repair costs of the used car. So while the used car may be in fairly good shape, I've had students say, yeah, but would I have to buy new tires or something to make it really safe once I purchased it? And I would need to consider that. Insurance cost, how much is it going to cost to insure either car? The purpose of the car, is this going to be a car that I'm only going to take to school and to work, and it would just be like a secondary car for the family, or is this going to be the primary car that my family is going to need? Of course, interest rates and financing always comes up, and budgeting and the monthly payments. How much can I afford for a monthly payment without breaking the budget every month? The odometer reading, does the used car have a lot of miles, or is it a low mileage used car? So those are just some of the things. They'll keep going for a while, and that's a good thing. You want them talking and thinking, but you just write down all the vocabulary, all the ideas that they have on this flip chart. Next slide, Marian. The way this would work then is that once your vocabulary list is made, your students will need to find a partner. I would suggest that you have them find a partner that's on the opposite side of the room from where they are, not someone sitting next to them or maybe even at the same table. And I'll tell you why that would work the best in just a moment. So the instructions you're going to give to the students are they are going to stand up and find their partner, and they're going to stand face to face. No sitting. Everybody has to get up because this is a kinesthetic activity. In fact, this activity actually will use a variety of learning modalities, which is another thing that I really like about this activity. So you're going to have them find their partner, but they don't take any paper or pen with them. They're just going to be listening to each other. One of them is going to convince the other one to buy a used car, and the other one is going to convince the partner to buy a used car. They can use the vocabulary words that are on the flip chart, or they can even come up with their own words, their own vocabulary, or own points that they might want to consider. Give them about 2 minutes each. You will need to tell them when to switch so that both sides have equal time. I found the first couple of times I did this, I would say, we're going to take about 5 minutes for y'all each for y'all to total time. And what would happen is after the 4 to 5 minutes, the first person was still talking, and the second person never really got to say much. So I found it important to be sure and tell them it's time to switch when you're monitoring the time. The only instructions you're really going to give them is to listen very intently to what their partner has to say. Next slide, Marian. So when time is up, they're going to go back to their seats, and they're going to write down everything they can remember their partner told them. This is why I don't want you to tell them ahead of time. I just want you to tell them just to listen. So now they're back at their seats. Everyone's quiet, no talking or getting help, which is another reason why I like the partner to be on the other side of the room, because sometimes if they're at the same table, it's real easy to say, what was that you told me? So just try to keep them on opposite sides of the room. And now they're just thinking and reflecting on what they were told. And so after that usually takes about 5 minutes or so. And then they're going to take their list and find their partner again and read their list to each other. The partners can now remind them of anything they had forgotten, and then they can write those points down. And then they're going to put their heads together and make a decision about whether Bob should buy a new car or a used car. And they will then explain and defend that position to the class. So that's the gist of the activity. I have found that this was an excellent activity to build listening skills. The next time you do this activity, students will remember that they were supposed to listen intently, and they always begin to pay closer attention, and their focus is always more, and they begin to build their listening skills that way. You can also add other topics to this, and as time goes on, you can do this activity again, and you can have them add other topics that they might want to consider. I think things like, and I always just ask my students, what is it that you're interested in? Or when students would come up to me and ask me a question, I would think, wow, that would be a good thing we could add to that new car, used car activity. It could be things like, I know I had a student once that wanted to know how much he was really spending when he leased or rented furniture or appliance versus how much how much did he pay over time versus just purchasing it. That would be a good one. Whether it's better to rent or own a house or a place to live. The only thing you want to consider is not to have anything very controversial, because that doesn't work well. Next slide. So these are the benchmarks that I thought applied well to this lesson. You can see there that we had the benchmark: use a variety of strategies to enhance listening comprehension, and listen actively and effectively in a variety of communication situations. So I thought those were, and Marion, the next slide, please. And there was also the one under teamwork, because it also covers the benchmark there that you see that says consider arguments and conclusions from one's own perspective and from the perspective of other team members. So that was another one. Next slide. But there are also other things that you can do to expand this lesson. So if you would just take a few minutes and think about that and type in the chat box, this lesson could be expanded, and I want to hear what your thoughts are on how you might expand this lesson to cover other benchmarks. So I'll give you just a minute to do that if you'll start thinking about that.
When you say expansion, you mean like after they've taught this lesson, what could you do with this the next day?
Yes, like how else? Yes, other things that you could do with this same lesson to build upon it even more.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Marion.
Well, Janet, you definitely could do other things to expand with speaking skills.
You could. You certainly could. That's good. I'm seeing, yes, there's math. Y'all are talking about math. That's excellent. Financial literacy, real life scenarios. Yes. Thank you, Felicia. Real life scenarios always get the class excited. My class always got excited when we did this because they knew it applied to something that was very applicable to them and that they wanted to know about, and yet we could add in a lot of good lessons in there too, besides the life lesson. Very good. Let's see what else. Marion, do you see anything else coming up there I'm missing?
Communicating with an insurance company after the accident. That's a good one. That's always hard. That would be a good speaking and listening practice. Yes. Writing, expanding to writing.
Okay. Great. Well, Marion, if you'll go to the next slide, I'll share some of my thoughts. And I think you've covered a lot of these. You could expand it. Some of the ways that I thought we could expand it would be by adding a writing assignment. There's certainly math in there on the budgeting. Someone had mentioned that. Someone mentioned financial literacy, which I was really glad to see because that was one of the ones that I wanted to make sure we mentioned. On financial literacy, one of the benchmarks there were a couple of benchmarks. I know that's, like I said, math and financial literacy are both in the math, but yet we could expand this to include that, even though it started out as an ELA lesson. You can certainly do that with content standards. And so under financial literacy, there is one that talks about developing an economic way of thinking and problem solving as a knowledgeable consumer. So you could certainly add that in and do some lessons on that. There was another one on applying critical thinking skills to analyze the cost and benefits of personal financial decisions, including the assumption of large amounts of debt, which would certainly be applicable to this and could be expanded on. So I hope this might be a lesson that you could use in your classes, or maybe if you're not a teacher but you could share with your teachers, then maybe they could use in their classes. It will be posted on the Community of Practice after we finish this webinar. And so, Marion, if there's no questions, I'll turn it back over to you. And I thank you so much for the opportunity to share this lesson with y'all today.
Jan, thank you for sharing it. And yes, as Anne-Marie's been mentioning in the chat, we will post all of these resources that we're sharing with you today in the COP so you can get a copy of them. So thank you to all our presenters today, Delia, Angie, and Jan. It's been a great source of information for all of us, I think. So what's coming next? There are 2 more webinars in this this project. The next one will be on April 19th and 20th, and then the next one, and that one will have an ESL lesson example and two presenters. One of them is Liz Moya, and I'm hoping also Mike Sainz, both from El Paso, so those will be in April. And then we'll have a similar webinar in May that will highlight a math lesson that Anthony Chan will do for us. So thank you to everyone for coming today. Have a fabulous rest of your Friday and weekend, and I will be meeting with you again in April. And look to the COP for all of these resources. I'll be posting them actually right now after we close. So thank you, and see you online. And I think, Beth, you wanted to say a few things.
I just wanted to give a special thank you to Angie, Jan, and Delia for being willing to share both their successes and some of their challenges, and we very much appreciate what you're bringing to this project. And I want to thank all of you. This has been a lot of work, and you're doing great things, and I just want to let you know how much I appreciate how hard you're working. So everybody have a good weekend, okay? Bye.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And I will go ahead and for all of you that are still on the line, we will stay if there are any last-minute questions for a few minutes. Thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful weekend.
Judy, thank you for that comment. I'm glad it's useful for you, and I'm sure it does feel isolated out there sometimes, so I'm glad this is working.
I think I see any more questions in the chat pod, everybody. So I think that Angie and Delia is not on still, but Jan is. So for those of you, Angie and Jan, that are still listening, thank you so much. Again, as both Beth and Marion said, I second it. And so everybody have a wonderful weekend. And I always just like to say we're going to close the webinar now. Because there's no more questions, and I don't like to shut the door without saying goodbye. So we're going to do that. So take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.